This is a Chaos Inoculation Cast on Freeze Flicker Strike Lightning Warp Invoker Monk, CoF Flicker Warp for short. Capable of completing several rounds of energy fill in one flicker across two separate Cast on Freeze links, resulting in absurd power charge acquisition and multiple lightning warps going out right and left, yes, even mid-flicker. This powerhouse speed demon was once rather squishy but has evolved to pair high evasion with high damage reduction and a staggering health pool of 10,000 energy shield, capable of clearing an entire expedition in the blink of an eye, tanky enough to withstand Ritual's hardest encounters, strong enough to clear entire Delirious maps, and fast enough to whip around breaches in the worst layout imaginable. This build is a mapping machine and certainly does require some investment to get rolling like what you see here. And while this video represents a comfortable snapshot in progress of the build, make no mistake, there's still plenty of room to grow. Welcome to the build guide for this CoF Flicker Warp Invoker. Well. Hey guys, it's Snoo. We probably got a few new faces around here this time, so if you are brand new to the channel, welcome. If you are not new, welcome back to the channel. It's that time where I disclose what I'm doing in a proper build showcase guide form, in which case I will let you know there's a max roll link down below that has this build updated in its new CI Chaos Inoculation form. It will be a separate link. I'll put both links down there. No, I do not have a leveling guide for this. You'll have to look for that elsewhere. I heard Milky BK Maxwell is making one, so take a look at his channel. He makes pretty good content. But for now, we're going to start with this build, which I got to say has turned out very, very nice. A few major epiphanies I've had in the evolution of this build I'll disclose first. Otherwise, going through this like the usual fashion, I'm going to start with a proper mapping showcase of a tier 15 map with a breach, of course. And then I'll get into the gear. We'll show the skills. We'll look at the passive tree, the jewels, for which there are many. And then we'll do the path of building. Except no, I get to skip that one because it doesn't exist. Well, that's kind of convenient for me, not for you, I'm afraid. I don't really know exactly how powerful this build is as it stands up to some others because we don't really have the numbers to compare. And the numbers that we do have in this game are not, they don't disclose really the full picture. You really just got to see it to believe it. And I hope you saw it to believe it enough in the teaser that you're going to watch the rest of this video. And maybe you want to decide to switch to this build at some point, in which case I will warn you, this is an endgame build. It is not a early beginning build, although I did tease an earlier version a week or so ago, in which case the gear on that version was much worse. It was still quite fast, definitely a lot squishier though. And so yes, while this is not an outlandish amount of currency invested into this build by my standards, by some people's standards it will be wildly expensive. So you'll just have to see for it yourself. We'll get into all that. Let's get started. What makes this build so special? I would say the speed is absolutely second to none. Recently, I've discovered, just kind of unwittingly noticed, that my movement speed is of course pretty good. I got 35% movement speed boost, but we can't move all that fast in this game, so speed is absolutely premium. And that's one big reason why Deadeyes are so incredibly popular this league, because they can move while shooting. Well, what do you think of this? This is surprisingly fast move speed for the filler skill Tempest Rush. You might be wondering, well, how am I moving this fast? Well, it scales with attack speed apparently. No, I don't know what happens when you push it beyond the boundaries. We'll look at where all this attack speed comes from. But anyway, if you have a starter monk, you're definitely not moving across the screen that fast while you're using this skill and decimating enemies in the process with charged staff and whatnot. So that's a huge selling point. It's nothing I haven't even talked about on stream. It just kind of occurred to me unwittingly as I've progressively gotten faster and faster. You know, you sometimes take things for granted as they happen incrementally as you experience a character. But when I just sit here and look at this, I mean, this is wildly fast moving speed. Now the other thing is, of course, this build's major weakness for quite a long time was its defensives. So that's kind of hard to work on because, you know, it is by nature a melee, high agility, squishy build. But with some passives like this one, we get to have a whole bunch of evasion and armor while we play. And this is something that everybody basically has access to. However, very few monks currently are taking advantage of Chaos Inoculation and tailoring their gear specifically for Energy Shield. And then combine this with a recent edition of Grim Feast. Essentially, we get all the benefits of Meditate, which apparently doesn't work, by the way. Seemed to be bug. I tested it. Couldn't even make it work. We get all the benefits of this without ever having to channel or deal with being struck down while in maps. And it's an absurdly strong ES recovery, which was probably the third major insane thing about the build, is that going the ES route was always going to be a precarious thing because it didn't look like, especially theory crafting, there was any reasonable way to get recovery except for like the actual Chaos Monk that has ES Leech. We don't have that as an Invoker. The Invoker has the tanky side, didn't really have the recovery side. However, we've just knocked out 2 birds with 1 stone with Grim Feast, doubled our effective health pool, and got an absurd amount of recovery in the most meaningful way possible since running no life. So that's kind of where we're starting this video at. And now, let's go ahead and get a map showcase in here. I'm going to do kind of a proper 6-modded tier 15. I'm not going to go crazy and elevate it here. I'm just going to do kind of a standard one. And I'm going to find a breach. It's got to be one around here somewhere. Alright, so I had to actually cut the video because I accidentally did Mire map first, which is honestly the god-awful layout. Probably wouldn't make any build look good, and its density was quite low. So we're going to be going over to Savannah, which is a little bit better, and we'll plug this map in here, a true T15. It's no raised level or anything. So we're going to put this in, and we're going to see how this build goes. Inside a map, proper showcase, not just a highlight reel. We'll be looking for the one breach and maybe finish the map while we're at it. Got both cast on freeze links up there. We got Grim Feast, which is why you're going to see my ES go above the cap. We got shocked ground on me, but I'm going to be shocking ground too, which you'll see in a second here. There it is. That was my shocked ground, and you can see the monster is going to get shocked. The monsters are getting shocked right there, which is why I can actually siphon power charges off the monsters standing on the ground, and they don't even get used up, which is how you get power charges on a boss. It's a little bit complicated, and it's definitely not the most optimized boss setup, which I will come out with a future video soon. But anyway, the ball's rolling now. I got charge staff, and then we're going to be doing some flicker strike business. The more density in a map, meaning the higher the juice goes, the more effective this becomes, by the way. I'm essentially all but ignoring mechanics at this point in the game because I have, what, 80% evade, 72% damage reduction, and 10,000 ES, so it almost doesn't matter. Really just all but stopped dying recently, level 92. Currently, been playing the game quite a bit, but again, tankiness was something that was solved later on, so it's more recent. Flicker Strike will target the bell sometimes, so that's kind of what happened right there. So I haven't even popped Unbound Fury for Avatar. You can see I'm just kind of using Tempest Flurry to force out a bunch of charged staff, and then Flicker Striking whenever I just feel like it. I always have power charges flooding in. I'm not using Combat Frenzy. I tried it. The problem is you can't gain power charges mid-flicker, which is what that tends to do. So that doesn't work well, and you actually need the power charges coming in between flickers, and that's how Profane Ritual is giving me. So you see it right there, just start loaded in. There will be a breach around here somewhere, and then we can basically finish it. Alright, that was a Flicker Strike. Here, this is a Flicker Strike with no charge staff up. You can see it's a little, or wait, no, never mind. Sorry, my mistake, I missed the buff there. I thought I flickered with no charge staff, but that is not the case. What I was going to say is that Flicker Strike is damage clear is pretty bad if you don't have charge staff up, so that's why that's more important. And then Herald of Ice is actually what's responsible for killing and clearing. That's why every single monster is blowing up here. Check this out. Very easy to kill an Essence mob when you start with a bell down and then just flicker straight into it. Quite funny, actually. I'm beginning to start to farm Essence a little bit because it's just hilarious to me and kind of it's quite satisfying. Never really thought I would be satisfied farming Essence of all things, but well, you know, they killed our boy Strongbox in this game, so that's all but done. I don't know where this breach is. Looking for it. I guess it's somewhere in the middle of the map. Still looking for that indicator. That was a nice flicker. You can see my little ES bar went purple. That means oh, there we go. Let's just flicker into it. That means I was taking poison damage, except I wouldn't take any damage. Now here's where the real fun begins. This is what you can imagine in a super juiced content. I'm going to go ahead and hit Unbound Avatar now to get even more efficiency around. I mean, the number of power charges I'm acquiring is just ridiculous. And at this point, you know, we're hoping for flickers to kind of take us around the map, which they tend to do that pretty well. I'm actually getting some pretty bad RNG on this flicker right here. These are Soul Eater breach mobs. There we go. I knew I'd probably kick in. Wow. Now, before, back in the day, this would get me killed. But now we're tanky, so it's okay. I might have ran out of mana there. Alright, so you can see this breach would probably have already closed right now for most people, but I just keep killing monsters, so it's quite alright. And, you know, I didn't get all of it, but you can see that was pretty good to go around there and get most of that, and there's just a lot of currency here on the ground.
Fate is on my side.
Also, doing the breach on this map doesn't really fully showcase the power of this build. The most satisfying moments that I've had are when I'm doing kind of a bad layout, a fairly bad layout, and then, for example, you have a breach that, I mean, it's just hopeless for basically anyone to get a good amount of kills on it, because it just kind of opens in a really tight corridor or something, but then maybe like at the last moment it will expand out to offer, you know, a huge amount of freedom and openness. I've seen that happen a lot, and then that's where the Flicker Strike just comes in great, because in that last moment I'll just swing around, you know, 5 different walls or something in the blink of an eye, and then suddenly it's just open season for killing a bunch of breach mobs, and that'll extend the breach even further. I wasn't able to show you that here. You just have to take my word for it, or stop around to the stream. You'll get to see that happen quite often. But anyway, we're done with this map showcase. I guess a little bit of loot drop, but nothing too crazy. I will now proceed with the gear. So I recently got quite lucky, actually, with quite a few crafts, which is one reason why the video is coming out now. I was going to make a video before the transition to CI. This is before a transition to crit, by the way, but that's coming at a later date, not happening yet. We'll start with a weapon which I crafted recently. We're looking at a 2.02 weapon attacks per second weapon. And I got very lucky and chaosed some garbage out for Merciless, the tier 1% fizz. I typically want to go for flat fizz, percent fizz, and then flat cold. Flat cold is actually mandatory for this build. Really do want it on the weapon too, a big number. And you really want a fast attacking weapon. And Crescent Quarterstaff, Expert Crescent Quarterstaff is the best base. It doesn't necessarily have to be this one. Normally I would put percent increased fizz damage, but since I don't have flat rolls, actually it seems to make more sense, especially with the elemental rolls, to go for attack speed here, making this the fastest weapon in the game, basically, without, or quarterstaff in the game, without, you know, going further into corrupting it or whatever. Absolutely ridiculous, over 2 attacks per second, and that's why it's just so buttery smooth out there and just feels great to play, just kind of gliding on clouds, Tempest rushing or flicker striking or whatever have you. Flicker strike actually is very slow attack speed on the initial attack, but I'm attacking so fast now I don't feel it. Anyway. Gloves crafted recently, a huge evasion roll. I actually kind of regret not putting rarity in here, but I was just kind of thinking, you know, how do I get as much? Yes, this was before the Grim Feast discovery. No res, would like res on there, but those are some spanking good prefixes. Attack speed I really want in there. I gotta get intelligence somewhere. The mana per kill is useful, but we can actually get it on jewels, so that's the only kind of bad mod. Boots were also crafted recently. Stun threshold, not very useful for me, but everything else is very nice. And rarity is also nice. Wish I had rarity socketed in. We'll swing around to the helmet. The helmet I've had for a while. The helmet matters a lot because in the passive tree you'll see that we get additional evasion per energy shield on the helmet. You can get better than this. You can also get some magic find on there. Intelligence here again. But yeah, it's kind of like 3 separate energy shield rolls with some decent resistance. Makes it nice. Very recent craft on the chest. YOLO slammed after crafting. I'm telling you guys, I've probably slammed 1,000 chests at this point. and finally got one that was well over 2,000 at 2,200. I even divined this one a couple times to try and get that flat roll up there because it mattered a lot. But just a terrific chest. I'd rather not have stun threshold, but I don't care. I mean, I'm not going to complain about that. It'll be a long time till that one gets replaced. Probably the least impressive item would be the belt here. +1 charm slot I feel like is pretty useless. I already kind of handle slows pretty well, which I have the charms down here. I think I could just go with golden charm only, which does proc off the killing rares, and then I would have pretty high uptime in these maps. But I don't know. I haven't actually tested removing slows. Maybe I'm wrong. But life doesn't matter, and we can't get ES on the belt prefixes, so it's really just all suffix. Mana is a great place to get a huge mana roll, and increased life flask recovery rate does matter. I'll go ahead and show you just so you can see. That is for Eternal Youth. Now, this is a good thing to have when you go Chaos Inoculation, because then suddenly it works for that. Next up, we'll actually, since I'm already talking flasks, I think these flasks are really good. The only time I've ever had issues with charges is on a boss fight, and again, a separate bossing setup, but these are great flasks for bossing for sure. Rings are pretty good. I'd like to have more flat cold on here, or flat anything. Flat fire even would actually be okay. But yeah, this is still fine. Huge evasion roll, defensive catalyst, rarity, nice resistance, strength is okay. Then we got Death Rush, and since I am capped on res almost, I can have the liberty of running Death Rush. This gives me Onslaught, which is 20% skill speed plus 20% movement speed buff that's up just about all the time, certainly during Breach. Evasion is nice. Nothing else really matters. Obviously, the Fizz Leech doesn't matter at all. Leech doesn't really work very well. That's pretty good segue into talking about mana management. It's basically all about regen, and so that's going to be right here. I have actually have more than that. Yeah, I think I have more than that. Well, it says 86 right now. I thought I had over 100. Oh, I have over 100 with the Breach Ring. Yeah, okay, that's right. Okay, so this is kind of a swap that you can do. I'm thinking Breach Ring with mana catalyst in the end with a huge mana regen and huge mana roll would be really, really nice. Maybe the Leech matters. Not sure, so this is mapping setup. This would be a bossing setup. Just kind of teasing a future video. I'll probably have a better ring than that, actually, when that comes out. Now, the necklace is an interesting one. I kind of want to prioritize rarity. I really want all attributes. Is a great place to get an all attribute roll because we do need a little bit of strength, and that would cover that. We need a lot of int and a lot of dext. And so we're kind of strapped on the attribute situation, but I couldn't get it on here. A bit regrettable. Got a cold res roll. Doesn't have all res either. But it's got the mana regen. Do you kind of need mana regen somewhere in there? Because, I mean, Tempest Flurry, even with Inspiration linked, can't handle that. But look at those prefixes. All triple defense with the rarity base. I'm pretty happy with that. Careful Consideration is Anointed. That is, I don't even know where that is actually. Okay, we found it here. 100% increased evasion rating if you haven't been hit recently, with a penalty if you have. Excellent for any kind of hard-hitting boss content. It's the only time I'm really fearing for my life. So I think that's probably going to work there. I believe that's it for all of the gear. I'm pretty happy with it. We'll look to get more rarity. I definitely have over 100% rarity, counting the charm for sure. I think around 130 or something like that. So we'll get more. We'll get the proper gear with the jewels in there and whatnot in the future. Okay, we'll go over the links now. I think I'll start with the meta gems. We're running 2 Heralds with this setup, Herald of Ice and Herald of Thunder. I used to not run Herald of Thunder, but it's just nice. It just clears even better. Herald of Ice will have link Cold Infusion with Innervate. I have put Innervate in every single possible location you can think of, and its highest uptime generally in maps comes from Herald of Ice. That's because those ice pops go off faster than anything and hit really hard, especially we have damage links like Cold Infusion, Elemental Focus. You have Long Shot, which is also good. If you're far away from the pop, then that counts too. Shock Siphon is honestly probably not even necessary anymore with Grim Feast, but this was a halfway decent way to get ES recovery in a bygone era when I was worrying about ES recovery. Don't really have too much now. But it's also on kill, so it won't work, you know, single target on bosses or whatever. Herald of Thunder is going to have Lightning Infusion, and then Momentum. I believe this works because I checked Inevitable Critical, and that was working on the stats. I can't really check this sheet, but this is kind of going on faith that this works. I think when you get the buff up top, I think momentum kicks in at that point. I could be wrong though. Conduction and coursing current, because you're going to get this somewhere. I used to put this on charged staff, but I had to put the exposures there now, so this is another reason why I'd like to run Herald of Thunder, so I can make use of these support gems right here. Alright, then we have our 2 cast on links, and then this one is responsible solely for getting us power charges. Got Profane Ritual, Profusion, Impetus, and Energy Retention. If I had another one, I'd probably put Hinder in, maybe, or something like that, so it's one of the few non-6 links that I have. And so, yeah, that's just going to get me so many. that sucker is spinning around so many times. Then we got Cast on Freeze, which has a little bit higher cast and no help from the energy. This one goes off a little less often. Ball Lightning and Lightning Warp together, you must be put in this order. The Ball Lightning will go off and Lightning Warp will instantly port me there. If I'm mid-flicker, it doesn't seem to port me there, but it still goes off. It's kind of weird, actually. Freezing Mark does go off as well, mid-flicker, multiple times. One flicker strike can result in this whole thing going off like 5 or 6 times, and actually getting like Freezing Mark explosions 5 or 6 times, as well as 5 different shocked grounds everywhere. It's actually quite fantastic. Overcharge is a pretty obvious choice here, because this is a very long-lasting shock, and I have shock duration anyway, and so I have a whole bunch of AoE, and it's terrific against bosses. When the boss freezes, absolutely love it. Unleashed is a peculiar one that actually seems to work pretty well for getting a few extra kicks out of it. I was surprised to see this working. Just doing a lot of experimentation. I think this one is probably the best. Definitely got even more lightning warps than usual for that. Then we got Grim Feast down here. This one's going to house our regular buffs up, which, I mean, Herbalism does count for the Life Flask. I just happen to have enough. I would take Herbalism out if I had, let's say, a 2k chest. If not, if I had only an 1800 evasion chest, I suppose I would probably have to take Precision out, which isn't working all that well, but you really want to have at least that for clarity. I can't remember the exact numbers, somewhere around 1800 to have this whole setup plus clarity. And then of course you need an unset ring in there somewhere. Alright, Charge Staff is a buff we keep up at all times. Try to. This is where Ice Bite goes off. Highest uptime for Ice Bite is in Charge Staff. Charge Staff is high on the weapon elemental damage, so Primal Armament is going to be what we're doing there. Rising Tempest is good here. We don't actually have a fire skill with this setup, so probably only getting 24% more elemental damage there. That was bugged before, I guess. And then the exposures have changed and they're now conditional, which means you kind of need to put them on an actual kill link or something's doing real damage. So this will crit at least, you know, every now and then, and obviously it's pretty good for shocking too, so a pretty sensible place to put that there. Siphoning Strike is the least important skill in terms of supports. It used to house all the exposures, but it still has, you know, like Practice Combo, Maim, Blind. You can put Cull in here. I got Electrocute, Neural Overload, which it doesn't ever really electrocute. I used to have that in Tempest Flurry, but I decided to take it out. The loss of shock really bugs me a bit. And it looks like they nerfed Electrocute's build-up without investment into it by about 50%, so it's kind of a bummer. However, I put it in here because these aren't really important for anything else. I can't get it to ignite. I can't get it to really strip off armor, much of anything. So I decided, or stun for that matter, I decided Electrocute because based on the assumption that Combat Frenzy will work if you just start building up a freeze or Electrocute, it's a nice idea to have this in here because it probably counts as an extra elemental ailment on the enemy, even when it's just built up slightly. I think that's how the game's programmed, kind of going on faith. But anyway, probably don't need Neural Overload in that case. But anyway, yeah, this is definitely the least big-brained thing set up there. But let's move on to, honestly, maybe the most important skill in the whole build, the staple, the one that you're always using. If nothing else is going on, we got Tempest Flurry. You get this, God, at the end of Act 1, you put a martial tempo in it right away. Magnified Effect is great here. I have had this on Ice, or on Herald of Ice for a while, but I like it here because it'll help extend the reach. If you quality this up, 8 melee strike range plus 2 on the passive tree. Magnified Effect is compounds that, and additional area of effect is huge. My Tempest Flurry is reaching half the screen at least. I can test it myself by seeing how much rage I get. You need it to reach far in order for rage to mean anything, especially when you're killing stuff quickly. And then I have to have inspiration support. Why do I have to have inspiration support? Well, that mana bubble is not going to last very long. This is what you call having too much of a good thing, too much attack speed, and not enough regen. So this used to not be a problem for a very long time. One of the luxuries of just kind of starting this build and not having a great set of gear is that you don't attack fast enough that you need inspiration. You maybe put it somewhere else, but I need it here for sure. Crescendo is just a little bit of extra damage. Double strike's the final one. You see two light bolts go off at the same time there. The very last skill is also a very important one, extremely good for single target and kind of a good one, a home base you can call it. We'll put Overabundance and Persistence. I discovered early on I could attack fast enough to get a double bell. You put one bell down, you can still generate combo points if nothing else. That alone is very, very valuable, but you can actually have two bells down. And so on bosses, I like to throw two bells down, pop Avatar, pop Flicker Strike, and delete a boss. Insert a clip of that. So if you were ever afraid of freeze not being able to be reapplied to an enemy, and that was probably the only thing that I was afraid of after the patch notes, well, it almost seems like it's even better than it was. Maybe it's just the absurd amount of cold damage that I have on the build. Speaking of cold, we got Glaciation. This was one of the most intelligent choices I made early on. Discovering, I'm just going to open this up here and show you what the damage spread is on here. Look at that, cold damage. Cold damage is just so huge on there. Huge cold damage on the shockwave. Very important that you get the freeze here. It freezes. I could be doing a tenth of the damage I do. This thing freezes so reliably. It's actually crazy how much the freeze builds up on bosses the moment I put the bell down. It's actually insane. And so the freeze always occurs from the bell, so might as well do deep freeze if possible. And Execute's a pretty good pretty good decision to put one here, because typically the bell isn't really all about doing damage, except towards kind of the end. You know, you start the fight initially, especially on targets that don't have a whole lot of health, like a map boss or really tanky rare. This is super valuable to have Execute in this place as opposed to any other spot in the build, I would say. Because like Flicker Strike, I'm hitting things at full life. Tempest Flurry is just kind of everything. Charge Staff is everything. But the bell, most of the damage is focused on the latter half of an enemy's life anyway, so it really makes a lot of sense to put it there. By golly, I think we got through it. No, we don't. We got Flicker Strike to do. All right, Perpetual Charge. I mean, you would have seen that coming. That's, I think, 25% chance in total with the passive tree. Close Combat. Pretty good place to get value out of that. Concentrated Effect. I don't really care about the Flicker Strike doing AoE damage. I got Herald of Ice for that. Rage Forge. Now, I feel like I need 2 or 3 rage on hit, but I only have 1, so I'm thinking about swapping another jewel out. We'll look at the jewels in a minute, but this is definitely a lot of extra damage. And then Culmination is really interesting. You can get that sucker up really high. That number down there, you'll have to watch the replay, see how high that number gets sometimes. But that first flicker out of like a 50 combo on this thing, that's wild. Wild damage. So the total package is, Siphoning Strike is kind of the opener. It can be used to get me a power charge if I need to. Lightning Warp, putting Shock Ground down is really helpful. I don't have Shock Ground on the passive tree, which we'll see in a second, or the Ascendancy tree. But Shock Ground is basically just kind of the gap closer at all times. Flickers down, this closes the gap. If Lightning Warp ain't going off, this is closing the gap. It really helps me get through the map faster, which you would have seen in the showcase. Tempest Flurry is the otherwise ability to just use at all times. This is our comfy zone. Even if you're bad at the game, if you just hold this button down, you are going to succeed pretty well. And then Tempest Bell actually gives a little bit of interesting combat options there for single target. I love this skill. It's really sad. I haven't heard anybody say a bad thing about Tempest Bell, and honestly, it's probably a little overpowered. This build is able to incorporate so many power charges. We can keep Charge Staff up at all times and flicker our brains off. And so that really works out nice to be able to have both of those buffs. I'm not sure if that was intended to be able to have to get that many power charges. But hey, they did just reduce the internal cooldown of Combat Frenzy like crazy. So maybe. Flicker Strike is just a feel-good ability, really helps save breaches, helps you get around the map. Actually amazing for Delirium because you make the connection point on the mobs if the density is higher, so it can really help with that. It can struggle a little bit when you run maps with like monsters have 50% increased resistances, or if you run like tier 18 maps equivalent, things like that, and you're not really well geared for it, can be a little bit of a problem. By the way, the map rolls that are really bad are there's a resistance mod there, it's fine. There's only one map roll that I don't take, or I don't run in a serious map, and that's this one. Monsters have 91% increased ailment threshold. When Avatar is down, that hurts. Now, I can still force it. The bell will still get push some of those ailments out, but it is kind of, well, to get that ball rolling is kind of rough when you're running a map like this for sure. Burning Ground doesn't matter because the regen is great anyway, and we have Heartstopper if we need to. This ES recovery, huge ES pool, has solved the Burning Ground problem, my friends, so that is not even an issue. I think that's it for the skills. Basically, kind of went through them all. Herald of Ice and Herald of Thunder just constantly killing things around, and then we got those beautiful cast zone links. The least important link in here, if I didn't have one, would be Herald of Thunder, and then, you know, if you really didn't want to, you wouldn't have to run this cast zone freeze. It's just kind of a flavorful choice. It's perhaps not extraordinarily useful, this link here, but the freezing mark getting out super fast and often actually is pretty strong, because we're not running Hand of Chayula, and I don't want to do that because Hand of Chayula has a base speed of 0.9%, and it cannot be improved, at least not through the weapon, which is why Siphoning Strike is just the best gap closing skill in the game, from what I can tell. Ice Bite certainly deserves an honorable mention, but Ice Bite cannot glide you across the map and make you feel like you're still moving forward, which is why I don't like it, although it is a great leveling skill. By the way, insert a little leveling section here. I think that the best start is either basic attack. You're going to go with martial prowess, or martial tempo rather. You're going to put it in the basic attack, which means it goes right here or something like that. Or you can run Glacial Cascade until you get the bell. You always use whatever you're doing with the bell. And then late in Act 1, you get Tempest Flurry or Ice Bite. Ice Bite is a better option for survivability unless you're able to pass gear down, because you're able to fund the character. And then you don't even really worry about anything else. Just Tempest Flurry or Ice Bite and the bell. And those two are your best friend. And, you know, you get this link here soon, or you get Combat Frenzy. Actually, you just get Combat Frenzy at 30 Spirit and never take that off until you're starting to do in-game with Flicker Strike, which you would do maybe level 60 or 70, something like that. Not really sure exactly how early you'd want to do that, but that is sort of leveling in a nutshell. You would get Heralds in as you can. I would probably just do, yeah, Combat Frenzy and Herald of Ice, I guess, is probably what I would do, or Herald of Thunder, maybe, if it was really lightning focused. All right, so we've done the gear, we've done the skills. Now, let's do some passives. Start with the Ascendancy. Also, when it comes to leveling, just go for these two up top. Once you get this, it just helps so much. Even, I mean, you obviously need an evasion chest here, and you need a big evasion chest for both of these, actually. But yeah, we're going pure evasion on the chest because we get to have extra energy shield based off of the evasion of our armor. And so that's why it's pure evasion. That's why there's no piece of gear that matters more than the weapon, actually. But then second most important one is the chest. Then, you know, there are so many different options. I love the fact that there's so many good ones. Later on, we'll probably go double crit with Elemental Expression. It's like, go that route, but it's too hard to prioritize those stats. I have to lose too much otherwise. Meditate, well, actually, it's not very good here, but maybe it could be for bosses if it was working. This one would be good if you're struggling with energy, but it seems overkill now. I always liked I Am the Thunder. It always felt good. I thought maybe I might do I Am the Blizzard and I Am the Thunder and skip Avatar, but I have to say Avatar is just so good. Anytime I'm in trouble. To be fair, I'm never really in trouble these days, but you know, it's really nice on bosses, at least, like map bosses. All right, from here, I started off on this side. So leveling, you would just go attack damage, and then you would come back around here for life on kill. Pretty quickly, though, you would spec out of that and go all ES. And then I do like wrapping around here with the ES to get a little bit of extra good stuff. And then percent damage as extra is just crazy strong. Chance to shock is good, too. We'll mirror that with the cold side over here. You could move up, but I think the best thing is to go straight here. I don't worry about power charges early on, not until you get charged staff. Forgot to mention that for the leveling part. You definitely get charged staff as soon as you can, and that's when where you're using the power charges. Dex, strength, and int, however much I need it. The spread here is good for me. Leveling, usually int is the problem of that. We're going to go down here to get harness the elements. This is just pure lovely damage and freeze buildup, especially because the freeze buildup's on the way and damage. This is really good. And this is one place where I think electrocute is benefits from. If you have a huge ES shield, you're going to get a whole ton of evasion. I'm getting over 750 evasion, flat evasion on this here, and I still get, you know, percent evasion max energy shield, which is tremendous for this setup going on right. Reduce mana cost, absolutely mandatory for any kind of bossing setup. Maybe not mandatory on maps, but it's still, yeah, probably pretty smart idea. Heartstopper, I sometimes unspec this if it's inconvenient. I need 1 extra point. Sometimes I inspect Storm Surge, not that useful in maps, but I really do like Unbound Forces. And we got, of course, a jewel slot up here, which we'll look at the jewels in a second. But there's some weapon swap shenanigans. Take a look at the max roll link for a clean setup here. This is me trying out some unarmed weapon swap stuff. Didn't really pan out all that well. Staggering Palm, I think, was the last thing I was trying there. Now, I did go across from here, but it's actually more efficient down here. We really, really need +2 melee strike range. It's huge for Flicker Strike and just kind of big for everything. And Tempest Flurry, all of that stuff. It's good all around. Everything helps out there. We need Rage on hit at least somewhere globally. While I do have 3 on Tempest Flurry, you need at least 1 somewhere globally. I think 2 or even 3 is probably better, but I'm debating the jewels there. Go ahead and take this because I'm already getting enough dexterity. Just path through here and some really, I mean, look at that. Look at that. An extra 2,200 evasion. You kidding me? What's that number again? 82% without Wind Dancer. Absolutely nuts. We'll go over here. I'm running Double Herald, so it's a pretty good idea to do this. And we have the extra points, although there's not making much sense. I'll look at that jewel in a second. I'm going to go ahead and take all of this. This matters a great deal when keeping up charge staff and getting those a little extra value out of Flicker, not full stacked. This is super, super strong up here. We're going to do that too. We're going to make our way up north, get a couple more power charges, and then this is the point where it matters a huge amount that you have a ton of evasion on your chest. So it's really nice to get that. I used to take Dynamism. It would be nice if I had some extra points, but I had to pull some somewhere. And yeah, I'm taking these. I played without these for a second, and man, I'm telling you, the moment you get frozen, you're like, nope, never again. I'm putting those points in. I don't care if it costs me 5 points. This is super, super strong, and it makes me so chilled ground only does 6% chill effect. And this basically means you almost never get frozen, even against bosses. We have a couple crazy strong nodes here with the freeze buildup and 50% increased damage with hits against frozen enemies. Frozen enemies ignore monster resistance. So good when the kill moment is. Can't wait to show you the video on bossing. We take huge advantage of this kind of thing. And we got Chaos Inoculations right here, which makes my life become 1, immune to chaos damage. Don't have to even search for chaos res gear, and don't have to search for life gear, although I do need to search for ES. But overall, while it's a kind of an awkward transition, it's incredibly good and efficient for gearing. I never had anywhere near this much life. Are you kidding me? And then we got some int here and just a super 60% max energy shield. You could say it's not necessarily worth taking, what, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 with a bonus 25 intelligence. I would say if you need intelligence at all on your gear, you definitely should be going up here to grab that. Now for jewels, we'll start with this one. I bought this one very recently. I bought this for the fire damage, okay? Because I'd like to just do a little bit of fire damage, try to get ignite, which would help with this, as well as the bell, increase the bell's damage. Yeah, by the way, electrocute be for the bell too. So if I get ignite on the bell, well then I am actually getting a whole bunch of extra damage, single target for sure. So gain up to 4% damage is extra fire damage per notable. The shock duration, I mean, I guess it's a little good because I am kind of vulnerable to shock, but not that big of a deal anyway. I was running a different color. Maybe I would do a ruby for like 3 rage on hit. I'm not exactly sure. At some point later on, we'll probably anoint this bad boy here if I can find it. Ooh, look at that one. Whew. A lot of extra damage. Could even justify using immolate support. perhaps, with all of this going on, because then ignites really would be going out. But that is a terribly expensive anointment, so I'm sticking with the cheaper option for now. Now for the rest of the jewels I kind of already mentioned, we got rage. Max rage isn't important here, just one rage on hit. AoE is probably the second most important one, and then the others are just luxury. Up here I have a few different things I'm looking for. I'm looking for max ES, freeze buildup, elemental damage, meta skills faster is nice. Let's see, what do my other jewels have on them? Take a look at this one. Okay, again, same thing. Oh, area of effect, increased chance to inflict ailments is okay. You know, these jewels aren't that amazing. This is probably the best one I have, especially with the roll range. Elemental damage, and then gain max energy shield as additional stun threshold, which is really good. Now, I was taking this point here for an anoint, but that allowed me to kind of get rid of that point, because you could have multiples of these. Very, very powerful. When we have this much ES, stun threshold's good, and that kind of makes these rolls almost useless when we can do this on multiple jewels. But you'll notice the most important roll is maximum ES, and that is what's giving me, I mean, these jewels by themselves are probably giving me 1500 ES or something like that. It's absolutely insane. So that's it for the passive, that's it for the jewels. I think we're done, guys. No path of building to show you. Yeah, just some final thoughts. Alright, so I would say that trying to get this build started, if this is something you're interested in, you got to worry about tankiness at first until you do the CI. If you try to jump straight into Chaos Inoculation, you might get your butt handed to you from that awkward transition. I would be worried about especially recovery. Grim Feast, though, give that a try. If you're already doing this build without Chaos Inoculation, just put Grim Feast on with like 1000 or 2000 ES and see what happens. I think you'll make that transition more quickly, more swiftly at that point. Once you realize just how insane that ES recovery is. ES recovery was always going to be one of the presumably unsolvable issues of this class, but we definitely figured out what to do in maps. Now, I showed you a huge breach. By the way, here's the Atlas tree that I'm using right now. I showed you a huge breach that had, you know, all this stuff here, and yes, I was able to solo. I didn't need carried for anything. I was able to solo the boss in this enormous ES pool with the bossing setup that I have. Will be in a future video. I was able to tank those slams, even at level 3 or whatever. I mean, I needed to use a health flask a few times, but it was fine. This is where we're going at. If you do high-level maps, you get to have all this stuff, so my bosses are a lot harder. They drop a lot more maps, consequently. But yeah, be warned, it is very squishy at first until you have things nice fully set up. You can probably fudge on damage a little bit. I would not ever do this build without having a good high cold roll, and I would really like to have attack speed roll at least on one of the decent bases. You don't have to have this much fizz damage, but you really have to have cold damage. Lightning damage, by the way, is not super strong here, for the record. I mean, it's okay. It's okay, but it's not a real winner here on the staff. So the staff's not actually that amazing. But yeah, just trying to get all the resistances is a lot easier when you get 20% all res back. Death Rush is not mandatory, it's just a luxury slot, but it's really nice to have as a substitution for bossing setup. That's a really great thing to have that, to have all your, you know, resistances and attributes covered otherwise. But if you're trying to get into the build, obviously you would devote both rings to trying to get all the attributes and everything. Rarity is also a luxury. I wouldn't try to start exactly with that, but I am noticing an improvement in drops, so rarity is definitely going to be something you want to get in the long run. You have a lot of things to build up to, okay? You got to build up to CI, you got to build up to crit, got to build up to rarity, got to build up, you know, to damage. And so multi-layered, it's going to be a long time until this build is, you know, shall we say totally done. You guys know me. I like playing one build usually per league session, and I just take it all the way, baby. We got a few thousand exalts, maybe a couple thousand, and 2,000 or 3,000 exalts invested into all this gear at this point. I've been doing a lot of profit crafting, trying to craft my own gear, purchasing other half-baked items, and slamming them, exalts, chaos. Like I said, I've slammed hundreds of chests at this point to arrive at this place, but I'm able to sell some too, okay? I'm able to sell things that don't quite hit exactly right. Oh, that's my old weapon. You know, things like this. I was trying to craft a chest, didn't quite hit, still hit really good. Or a helmet, I mean. This is an old helmet. And this is an old amulet. I slammed all spell skills in randomly, and then obviously I just stopped there. So learning how to craft could be good too, and that might be also another video I could make. I do have quite a few robust live search tabs up, which I don't know if I'd share the exact tabs, but I could help educate you guys a little bit on how I was able to successfully do a lot of blending in farming and hideout warrioring stuff to really help get a nice efficient set of gear. Let me know in the comments below if you think that would be nice. The bossing version, the how to get like all the gear, crafting. Not really. It's not so much about crafting. It's more about purchasing items off trade, using trade to your advantage. Live searches, the search functionality of that. There is a website for that. And there will be a loot filter link down below. It's never sync loot filter. This came courtesy of himself on Twitter, I think. So there's no official release of that. We're just kind of having to use the unofficial release. So we'll have that link down, the Maxroll link. There will be 2 links down below. It'll be kind of the finished non-CI version, and then the current CI version, which will be updated ongoing. And then we'll probably have a crit version later on, or rather a bossing version. So a lot more content to come. I'm going to be coming out with all kinds of videos moving into the future, but this is, one of the big ones. So we got it done. Thank you guys for watching. Let me know what you think in the comments, and I'll see you in the next video.